You know, The World Ends With You is exactly the kind of game we made this channel for. It's critically acclaimed, but has something of a devoted niche following, and it's incredibly unique. What's not to love about it? But to get serious for just a second, I really like this game, and I thought it'd be fun to break it down a bit more to figure out exactly why I feel that way. We gathered up all the scores for the game that we could find online, and the average came out to an 88 out of 100. Like always, we're going to rank the story, characters, music, visuals, and gameplay from the worst to the best, and then give our overall thoughts of it at the end. Oh, and keep in mind that this is just kind of like my opinion, so I guess, thank you. All right, let's do it. In 5th place are the visuals. Let me just say that I fell in love with the art direction of this game at first sight. I still love it. Love it. It definitely has its own distinct style, and I give a lot of the credit to the visuals for making the game such a unique experience. One thing that I absolutely love is how this game uses the top screen of the DS. It's usually some random but pretty sweet looking landmark in the city, like one of the towers or some graffiti on the wall. It gives a lot of character to the setting that The World Ends With You takes place in. The hectic urban setting and the stylish character models and the focus on apparel and all that, it's a pretty big breath of fresh air in a genre where all games can kind of start to look the same. Put simply, it's cool. Thumbs up for that, Square Enix. Thumbs up for being cool. But an art direction is a good way of describing it. The artists were going in the right direction, but fell just a little short of the final destination, I feel. One problem is that the city just looks a little too flat, like there isn't much sense of a third dimension going on. It makes it so that hardly any of the city's objects really demand your attention. I do like how they made the buildings look a little bent and off kilter. It's a nice kind of subtle way to tell us that there's something pretty wrong with the city. That's a pretty nice visual touch. The battles look great, and the attacks mostly all have some pretty cool effects to go with them. But there aren't a ton of frames of animation, so the game doesn't look completely fluid. But it still looks more than good enough, especially considering that it's a Nintendo DS game. But the worst visual offense is the shockingly bad menu interfacing. It's shocking. I'm shocked. I feel like I'm looking at a coupon booklet designed by a blind guy who hates epileptic people. It's unintuitive to the point where I have some serious doubts as to whether I'm just going crazy or I'm missing something completely obvious and should feel like an idiot. Buying and equipping gear is an exercise in life-questioning futility. You can't compare items to each other and have to flip through like 4 tabs of info to understand even just the basic information of what exactly you're looking at. And there's no rhyme or reason as to how it's all just dumped into your item subscreens. It's like those junk drawers everyone has somewhere in their house where every loose item ends up, never to be seen again. Okay, it probably seems like I only have bad things to say about the visuals, but I want to reiterate that for the most part, I actually really like the way this game looks, and give it a ton of points for individuality. Honestly, mostly pretty cool visuals. Overall, the visuals get 15 points out of 20. In 4th place is the music. You know, when I first started playing The World Ends With You, I got this feeling deep in my gut that the music was actually going to be the dark horse to win it all. I've said before that I'm a huge sucker for funk, and the game has funk to spare. I'm a huge fan of the instrumentation too, which is solid from front to back, and personality just pours out of the soundtrack. It'll come down to subjective taste as to whether you like it, and as for me, I mostly liked it. Mostly. I can see, or maybe I should say hear, why somebody wouldn't though. For obvious reasons, it's highly influenced by the contemporary Japanese music scene, which isn't always easily accessible, so it'll mostly come down to personal taste as to whether you like it or not. I can't say I'm crazy about every song in the game, but I do think I can recognize when a track is good, even when it isn't necessarily my thing. I do have to say though that a few of them just aren't that good. Opinions. A couple of the songs in the game try so hard to bring that hard urban attitude, but the songs just sometimes feel like the watered down version of the hip hop genre aimed at kids whose protective parents don't want them listening to the real thing. It just feels a little juvenile despite the tone they were going for. Yeah, musically speaking, almost every song on the OST is awesome, but the lyrics sometimes don't really match the style of vocal delivery. There's one song that sounds like the lead singer is from a cheap knockoff band of a different knockoff band of the Beastie Boys. The lyrics don't even make sense sometimes. It's just a little distracting. The reason that this all bugs me so much is because the main character is a bit of a loner and uses music as an escape from the world, and so it becomes a major staple of the story we're being told about him. For us players, the more the music resonates with us personally, the more meaningful and exclusive Neku's escape from the outside world becomes. Again, like the visuals, most of the music does a great job at this, and a couple of tracks I dare say are even exceptional. I've listened to the OST a few times out of my own volition, and enjoyed it, but there are a few tracks that have me breaking land speed records with my fingers to skip before true suffering begins. Overall, the music gets 16 points out of 20. In 3rd place are the characters. Shibuya is packed with people from all different walks of life, vastly different from one another, and yet all finding a place they feel like they belong on its streets. One boy in particular has been raised by the city, and he finds himself fighting to save the one place that he feels at home. Neku, even while in the throes of the raging tempest of teenage hormonal imbalance, actually ends up being a pretty good character. He's one of those childishly edgy loners when the game begins, but I found myself pleasantly stunned at his progression. He legitimately changes into a likable dude, rarely regressing back into his shell once he's emerged. Usually characters in these kinds of games stay stupidly emo for way too long, but Neku recognizes his shortcomings and moves past them.
I'm glad I met you guys. You made me pick up on things I probably would have just gone on ignoring.
I like that. The friends he eventually opens himself up to are a mixed bag, both in terms of personality and likability. Shiki's insecure, but charming and lovable, and is really the one who kickstarts Neku's transformation. I like her. Joshua's fascinating and infuriating, mysterious and a bit misunderstood. Again, I like him, but for totally different reasons from Shiki. The game definitely does a great job of having a diverse cast of characters with totally different personalities. And then there's Beat. Beat. Beat is the result of the writer watching the breakdancing movie You Got Served, and then coming to the conclusion that the bad white guy in that movie is what cool people are actually like.
You suckers got served.
They are. They're not. They're not. Seriously, I don't think anyone has ever said, "Step off my grill, yo," unironically. Back to what's important though. Neku and the crew are completely different from each other, and we get to watch him learn that that's totally fine. Even if you're a homebody or a bit quieter than others, or not as talented as them, or whatever it is that sets you apart, you're just as welcome in the city as anybody else. The impartial city streets welcome all without passing judgment, and it becomes home. As the great Kurt Cobain once said, "Come as you are." I care about these guys now, and more than the story itself, the biggest driving force for me to finish this game was to see their stories through to the end. They are what the game is about, and by the end of it all, I had the biggest, dumbest smile on my face for them all. The cast of villains is pretty basic, but they fit nicely into where they're needed in the game. They do take the easy way of making you hate them sometimes, but I can't deny that it's effective. I felt some pretty genuine disdain for them, which for bad guys is high praise, I guess. Overall, the characters get 17 points out of 20. In second place comes the story. The World Ends With You tells a pretty simple tale, so it took me a little bit to put my finger on the reason why I ended up liking it. One of the reasons I determined was that it's pleasantly coherent for a JRPG, all things considered. Usually I find myself needing spark notes and psychological counseling to figure out what's going on in these kinds of games, but I actually followed this one pretty easily. Until the end, that is. I caught the general gist of it at least, though. I just needed a little bit of help. Story of my life. But yeah, the ending is nice, just a little confusing, I guess. Another reason that I like it is that it's much more a journey of personal discovery for the characters than just the usual global crisis sort of thing. It's actually really cool if you start thinking about it a lot. It's not the end of the world for these characters, it's just the end of their world. It's not until the main character is faced with the prospect of his first friend's death that he starts to realize how profoundly linked he is with the rest of humanity. The rippling effects that even a single life have are immeasurable, and the loss of one carries immense implications for every single other. I like that. That's pretty cool. I feel a little silly saying this, but I started to experience that weird thing where you start thinking about how everybody else around you has had a life just as full of memories and experiences I have. The world doesn't end with you, no matter how alone you think you are. There's that thing with the title that games do sometimes. That's cool. My main issue with the story though is that the moral is almost painfully elementary. We've all been taught that everybody's important, and to be friends with everyone else since basically the day we were born. And maybe it's because I'm like 48 years old and the game designers weren't exactly thinking of my demographic when they made it, but there's definitely a healthy dose of groan-inducing edginess in the script.
Just go the hell away.
But if there's any upside to the frankly audacious levels of teenage angst, it's the fact that by comparison, every other theme in the game comes off as expertly crafted undertones of fatalism, nihilism, and existentialism. If you can pierce through the outer membrane of melodrama, you'll find some pretty interesting stuff. I wouldn't say that the plot is strong enough to make The World Ends With You worth playing just to hear the story that it tells, but it does fit in just fine with all the other pieces of the game. It gets 17 points out of 20. In first place is the gameplay. I hate trying new things. That's one of the reasons I've been wearing the same pair of underwear for like a week straight now. Yeah, gross. It's also the reason I quit playing The World Ends With You when I first tried it. I just couldn't wrap my mind around a new set of game mechanics that I'd never seen before. I'd never even seen anything close to this, honestly. And then one night, George Washington visited me in a dream and asked if America had been founded on the backs of quitters. I woke to the screech of a bald eagle, taking only the time to throw up like I usually do in the mornings, and then got to work. With the passing of a bit of time, I realized that I'd been missing out on some of the most unique and enjoyable gameplay I've ever experienced. Once you get into the meat of it, standard is maybe the last word that comes to mind. On the bottom touchscreen of the DS, you control Neku using exclusively the stylus, which tripped me up when I first started, but it ended up being pretty sweet. Scribbling out combinations of swipes, drags, pokes, circles, and lines trigger different types of attacks, and there are no shortage of available skills. By wearing different pins, you can stitch together huge varieties of playstyles. It's so simple, but at the same time super dynamic. Most of all though, it's fun. I found myself grinding out battles purely out of enjoyment. You also have control over your partner, who takes part in the battles on the top screen of the DS. While your dominant hand is using the stylus, your offhand controls your partner. It's not quite as demanding of your attention, and you can even set it to automatic so that you don't even have to bother with them at all. But taking the reins for yourself adds some craziness to the party if you're feeling up for it. That's pretty neat. Outside of the battle though, it's kind of your standard JRPG fare where you're just kind of running around talking to people, run into shops, you know, that kind of stuff. But you know, it's still pretty fun. There are some issues with accuracy and responsiveness with the touch controls, but it never really caused me any major headaches. I don't think I ever really lost a fight because of it in any case. Fighting effectively never really demands pinpoint accuracy anyways. Overall, I feel really good giving the gameplay 19 points out of 20. Not only did the game bring something completely unique to the table, but it ended up making something unprecedented work impressively well. There isn't a lot more to say about this game. It isn't perfect. Most games aren't. The World Ends With You is like a runaway train. It throws everything it has at you unapologetically and without reserve, letting you decide how to feel about it as it charges forward. No matter how bumpy the ride got for me, it was fun, and at the end of the day, that's what really matters the most. Our final score of 85 sneaks just within 3 points of the 88-point average it has, so it looks like the game is rated just about right. It goes without saying that it's completely worth playing if it looks like your kind of thing. Hey, thanks for watching. Tell us how you'd rank the different parts of this game. We'd like to know. Or tell us what you think of the game overall. That'd be cool too. See you next year, or whenever it is that we put out another video.